right, everyone. Welcome again. This is Danny Thomas, Talent Acquisition Strategist with the HR Source, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you all on the line with us in our first of many live webinars. And today's topic is leading a diversity and inclusion effort through leadership transition. And I couldn't be more excited to moderate this webinar because we absolutely have a fantastic expert with us, and I will be giving a thorough introduction of this gentleman who, let me tell you, you want to get your pens and your notepads ready because he is going to share some very dynamic information with us today on this topic. Now, before we jump right into it, I did just want to give you a quick introduction of the HR Source, just in case you're not familiar with us. The HR Source has been around now for over 2 decades, led by none other than Pat Hall-Janes, our CEO and dynamic president. She is just phenomenal, started her career as a recruiter, and she is a minority woman-owned business, which is very exciting, and again, also relates to our topic here as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we do provide staffing and recruiting resources in the areas of human resources, of course, accounting and finance, and administrative support. And we have a host of other value-added services as well, one of which is actually our Diversity ICDO services, Interim Chief Diversity Officer services. So that is what this is all about. We're launching this new section of our offerings, and our speaker today is an integral part of those new offerings. And so again, we can't be more excited about going into 2017. Now, all that said, just a little bit of housekeeping. You will see a chat box in your control panel. The chat box is on the bottom right of your screen of your control panel. If you have a question, that is the perfect place to include your question. You can send a message to us. Everyone will see your question. I believe there's a way for you to make yourself anonymous. And outside of that, we will also give an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation. Now, a few things about keeping in contact with us. We are all over social media. On Facebook, you can find us at the HR Source, the same on LinkedIn, Twitter, and even in YouTube. If you simply type the HR Source in the YouTube search bar, you will be able to find our channel and subscribe. Now, please stay on the line until the very end of the webinar. We have some exciting announcements, but again, we won't be sharing those until the end of the webinar. So let's get right into the topic. Ladies and gentlemen, again, leading a diversity and inclusion effort through transition of its leadership. Now, obviously, this is one of the most trying times for a diversity and inclusion program. Let's face it, there's several struggles. The struggle to find interim leadership, the struggle to keep activities moving forward, the struggle to keep the team motivated and committed to your diversity goals. And, quite frankly, in a transition, the diversity and inclusion effort can lose momentum. But in today's webinar, we will talk about those challenges, and we will talk about some proven strategies for addressing those challenges. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to our expert speaker, Mr. William Shackelford. Now, ladies and gentlemen, since 1998, Mr. William, affectionately known as Bill Shackelford, has assisted scores of government agencies, Fortune 500 corporations, and universities in addressing workforce diversity issues. He's been successful in making fundamental, lasting change in organizations by using a dual strategy of working from the top down, coaching and mentoring executives and managers, and from the bottom up, empowering employees through participation in diversity committees and affinity groups. Bill has over 40 years of work experience, of course, because he started his work experience at 10 years old, right, Bill?
Exactly, yes.
His past employers include the Atlanta University Center Dual Degree Engineering Program, and get this, the CIA, where his work is given credit as a major factor contributing to the agency receiving several national diversity awards. Bill is the author of the book Minority Recruiting, Building the Strategies and Relationships for Effective Diversity Recruiting, and has over 50 publications in journals, among which include the Society for Human Resource Management Journal and the Urban League Diversity Works magazine. His educational background includes a Bachelor of Science degree in Physics from Clark College and, check this out, a Master of Science degree in Applied Nuclear Science from Georgia Tech. So we are speaking with a nuclear rocket scientist, a host of certifications in project management, team building, diversity-related topics, and so much more. Bill resides in Atlanta near his 3 daughters and enjoys spending time with his 9 grandchildren. Welcome to our webinar, Bill, and thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. It is absolutely a pleasure, let me tell you. And it has definitely been a pleasure getting to know you. And let's just jump right in here. Bill, you spent 10 months last year in the role of interim diversity leader at Auburn University. How was that experience for you, and what did you learn from that experience that can help our listeners today?
Well, thank you again, Danny, for the introduction, and good afternoon to most of you. Good morning to some. I really appreciate you being here with me on this webinar to talk about this very timely topic. Danny, I noticed in my reading that the Chief Diversity Officer in corporate America sits in that position for only about 4 years. That is a very short period of time, and I think all of you would agree that leads to a lot of transition, a lot of turnover, and a lot of turmoil in organizations. And Danny mentioned earlier some of the challenges that teams go through when they're going through that kind of change. And what I want to do is touch on some of the things I learned in my tenure there at Auburn University about how to really make that change an easier transition for both the team members, the organization, and also for the new CDO coming on board. That's my goal for today. I spent those 10 months down there at Auburn, great assignment. I really enjoyed my stay down there, but it came about really in a very haphazard, impromptu kind of manner. Prior to that, 2 years ago, I teamed with a executive search firm to do an executive search for a diversity leader for the University of Alabama, Birmingham. Birmingham wound up selecting the number 2 person at Auburn. At the same time, the number 1 person in charge there was retiring. And so they lost all their leadership. We were surprised just a few months later to get a call from Auburn, from the provost, asking us to do the national search for them, for their new leader. When I met with the provost, he lamented to me that we had stolen his plan. His plan was to have the number 2 sit in while they did the national search. She was gone, so now he had no one. And in the spirit of the moment, I offered if you would consider having me come down a couple of days a week to help by supporting leadership. He thought it was a great idea. He ran it by the president. He agreed. And 2 weeks later, I was on board there as the interim Chief Diversity Officer for Auburn University.
Man.
It happened just that fast.
That's amazing.
For me, I looked at it as a kind of a caretaker position initially coming on board. It's kind of keeping things moving. That was the idea and the plan up front. But very quickly, I learned this was going to be one of the most rewarding experiences I had in my entire life, my professional career. It was rewarding for me because of several reasons. Number one, I was able to manage the unexpected, the unanticipated things that came up, and that was key. When you're making this transition happen, you're finding a new leader, you assume they will have some understanding about diversity, something about management, and I assumed that would be enough. But as I got into the role, I saw very quickly I needed more skills in team building and leadership and diversity training, also in doing strategic planning. The list went on and on and on. All these things I had done in the past, and therefore it was a challenge I was able to rise to in that position. But the biggest challenge I see right here in a family like this is what you don't know, you don't know. All those things you hadn't thought about and anticipated that come up. For me, again, I was able to rise to the challenge. I had some of those tools in my toolkit, so it worked out fairly well. For someone else in that position without those tools, it might have been a very trying experience for them. A second thing that made this very rewarding for me was I really think we made a difference. I made a difference in my presence. The team really made a difference in the time that I was there as well. Individuals on the team, they talked to me about their experience. The first month into my time there, I was stopped by several employees on the team telling me how much better they felt about the transition, about the change going on, about their job security, about just the motivation to do the job they were being asked to do during transition. The team itself gelled and came together. The university Officials noticed it. They commented on it to the provost, to me, to the team members. It was just a very, very good experience all the way around for them and for me. So we really did make a difference in the time that I spent there. And finally, it was a growing experience for me as well. And in case you're still wondering, yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks. I did learn some new things there. And in particular, I learned some things about leading and managing a team during transition, a diversity team in particular during transition. And those are the things I want to pass on to you as we talk today. Lessons I learned and the tools that we developed to make that process work and work well for that one institution. But in doing that one institution, I said at the very end, I need to look at this not as a one-on or one-off kind of experience, but how can we take this experience and make it one that lends insight for others going through a similar situation in other organizations. So my background as an engineer, as an analyst, I use that tool to actually do some analysis of the process itself, what worked, what didn't work, and why. And I identified a lot of things that really worked well in that transition and could group them into under 4 buckets, which I call success factors. And those are the 4 you see on the screen in front of you. Select the right leader, set clear expectations for the leader in the organization, properly introduce the individual, and establish a plan for that smooth transition. Those are the 4 key ones that I want to focus on today as well in talking about making that transition happen in your organization. But before I talk about those, we have a poll question we'd like you to respond to. If you look at those 4 and think about your organization, every organization is different. Which success factor do you think would be most important in your organization? The poll questions on the screen. You can select one of the 4 choices there. Just want to get a sense, again, in your organization, if you were going through this transition, maybe you are, maybe you will be, what do you think, based on your organization, its culture, would be the most important of these 4 to really work on and to get right?
And I can see the answers are rolling in. I want to give you all adequate time to consider these 4 different success factors and which one you believe would be the most important in your organization. And it looks like everyone has, well, not just yet. Let's see, we have 75% of the votes are in.
Oh, good.
Yes. Hopefully we don't have any, what did they call, dimple ballots or?
The chads, yes, the chads.
Yes, exactly, the chads with the dimples. No,
no hanging chads today, right?
Yes, no, yes. 92% of the vote is in, listeners, and if you haven't had an opportunity to log in your vote, we will give you another 10 seconds or so to get that in. Wow, these are some interesting results.
So what do they say there?
Let's see. Let's go ahead and close the poll. Unfortunately, we didn't get 100% of the vote, but we got 92, which, hey,
that's pretty good.
That's pretty good, all things considered.
Pretty good.
So we're going to go ahead and close the vote, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to share the results.
Okay, setting clear expectations, by far got the most response there. With selecting the right leader and establishing a plan, being close, properly introducing. I'll spend a few minutes on that anyway because it didn't get any votes, but it's still important. In my mind, all of these are important, some more so than others, and again, depending upon your organization, you know best probably what's most important. But I know from personal experience that you need to be concerned about all of these. If you want your interim chief diversity officer to have a similar learning and growing experience as I did and your teams to grow along the way, then paying attention to these 4 things, these 4 big success factors really is important. And Danny, I know I took a roundabout way to answer your question, but I want to make sure I lay a good foundation for us to move forward in our discussion today.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move forward. And Bill, you mentioned the 4 success factors, of course, and we see that by far setting clear expectations is what the audience wants to hear most about, but we would appreciate if you would explore each one in more detail, starting with the idea of selecting the right leader. And, you know,
Okay.
every year, scores of diversity and inclusion efforts go through leadership change, and you suggest through the webinar that it can be particularly challenging for organizations. So how should organizations go about filling the role of the interim chief diversity officer?
I will start with that very first one there, and selecting the right leader for this process. This one, for us, was critical in the job that we did down there. I think in many cases it's a critical one as well, because if you don't have the right person in place, all the others really don't matter as much. Having the wrong person, but empowering them properly is not going to get you where you want to be. So getting this one right becomes important. I'm going to spend a little time talking about this and looking at it from 3 points of view. 3 key things I think you need to do or be concerned about here: understanding the competencies that are required, know that you have options in your selection process, and finally being strategic in how you go about making that selection. These things worked very well for us, and I think will be key for many of you as well as you move forward. Let's start with the competencies piece here, because as I mentioned earlier, when I took the job at Auburn as a consultant, I assumed it would be a caretaker role, management skills, diversity skills, enough. What I found were all these things and more were required and needed as I moved forward. And so it kept morphing and growing into more and more. And had I not had those in my toolkit, I would have been ill prepared to really get them to the success they were looking for in that interim time period. On this list here, you see one thing that I didn't mention earlier, which is respected in the organization. That's one you want to make sure you don't overlook. Making sure the individual either is respected or can quickly gain respect in your organization is one of those keys that I know is important for success. But you look at my list here, you'll also notice that race and gender are not on the list. They are not competencies. What I find happening over and over again, I've been in organizations where they've made that selection for their new diversity leader, but they've made it based on issues of race or gender. I had one in particular that client literally said in the room they had very few people of color in management. They had just hired a new African-American male down in accounting, and they decided to tap him for this leadership role. Their logic was, and I quote, "It would show that we are still committed to diversity."
Oh, wow.
So they felt that just the race of the individual would show commitment. Obviously, that transition did not go very well, which is how I got called in to help out. But the other things you see on the left side of the screen, those key competencies, those are the most important ones. Now, you can factor in race and gender as plus factors. If you have 2 equally qualified candidates and diversity is an issue that you need to be addressing, then you can factor it in there at the end, but not at the beginning. So the competencies, again, thinking outside the box, thinking beyond what you think the role will require, requires you to really get to a point where, yeah, we may need more than just diversity skills and management skills to have this person be successful. The other key, another key is options. You do have options in terms of where you go and look for an individual to sit in that role. And there are basically 4. You can start within the team itself, looking at the individuals you have on that team or in that team. Each of these options have their pros and cons. With a team member, they probably know the individual, they know the diversity issues, they can get up to speed very quickly. But also you may have that they are not very well liked by the rest of the team, or someone else on the team may feel he or she should have been tapped for this role, and resentment sets in. So there are some pluses and minuses in looking at pulling a team member. Also, that team member you pick is probably going to be the strongest team member in your mind. That person may be a candidate for the role itself. And so you're pulling that person out of contention. It may be your best candidate for that role, which may be a loss for you down the road. And also, if they sit in that role as interim for a few months or several months, or in my case, 10 months, they may feel they can do that job. And when it's all over, they may be looking for a job like that as their next assignment, which means you may lose that great employee during transition. So pluses and minuses there. If you look within the organization, they may understand the culture, but you want to make sure you find someone who can meet the muster in terms of building respect in the organization too. And they have those diversity skills intact that allow them to be a role model to others while they're sitting in that position. What happens sometimes is organization will look around and find someone who's not very busy. You know, Bill's over there in the corner not doing anything.
Right.
Let's tap Bill and put him over here, let him lead this team. He's not doing anything important right now. If Bill was a poor performer in his last job, he's probably going to be a poor performer in this job as well. Putting him in that team is not going to serve you very well. And on the contrary, if you take one of your high performers from another unit and put him in his role, you now are putting two teams in transition, two units in transition, which again may not be the best thing for your organization. Two other options you have from outside the organization, getting someone with high-level skills, good background, can build a respect very quickly, but find that individual may be very difficult if you don't know where to look or how to source that market. And finally, you may leave the job unfilled. If you have a good, strong team that can manage themselves during this transition, that might be a good option. And they may see it as showing great respect for them and trust in them, and see it as a great challenge and step up to that challenge. But if you have a team that's not ready for that challenge, you may find just the opposite. Infighting, strained relationships, other things may come to bear as issues and problems. So again, pluses and minuses on both sides.
Absolutely. And, you know, before you go on to being strategic, I have to just interject. I completely understand the pros and cons that you just shared. I was in a situation, Bill, years and years ago where I was hired as a manager of diversity for a company that will remain nameless. And my diversity director had been hired from the outside with very limited knowledge of the organization and, believe it or not, Bill, limited knowledge of diversity at all. He had come from a completely different function, was let go from that previous job, and did in a favor to a friend. And you can only imagine what the diversity goals, what direction they went. And needless to say, I wasn't there for hardly 6 months because of the lack of leadership. So I can definitely appreciate those cons that you presented.
And that's the problem when you have the wrong leadership. Even if it's a short period of time, it can cause great turmoil in the organization, create more problems in terms of morale and other things, and really derail the effort at the time when you're trying to build this team up to get it ready for that next leader. That could be, getting this part right is important. This last thing you see on the screen, the matrix here, being strategic, the first thing I did when I started this job there at Auburn was to think about the whole transition piece and how to transfer my experience to the next leader. And spent some time thinking about that and working on that. And this matrix is one of the first things I did. And it looks at how different organizations would need different kind of leadership. And it brings together really all the things we said about the competencies required and getting the right leader. You can pull it out of this matrix here. On the left side, on the Y-axis going up the screen, you see directed, self-directed. This is talking about whether a team is leader-driven or more leader-independent as a team, self-directed. On the X-axis going across the screen there, we're talking about whether a team has a lot of established programs or well-entrenched or a lot of new initiatives, new programs. If you start on the top left, looking at a self-directed team, a team that is kind of leader-independent, that has established programs, who loses their leader, they may be able to manage themselves. This might be a team that could be left without management, without leadership, or you may want to add just a manager, quote-unquote, someone who can manage the administrative and cross-functional things for this team. But they may be able to work independent, and that interim leader may not need a lot of strong skills in diversity, because the team probably has that, and probably focus more on kind of management kinds of skills. On the bottom side of that screen there with the directed team, that needs more leadership direction and established programs, they probably need a stronger leader to make sure they can still have that leadership connection. Again, that leader may not need a lot of strong background in diversity and inclusion, but probably would need some skills in mentoring and motivating and coaching and those kind of things to round out their background in management and leadership. On the top right, with the self-directed team, a leader independent team, with a lot of new programs, and these may be new initiatives, such as you just launched a major training initiative, or you just launched a climate study or employee satisfaction survey, or even the past CDO was managing some of these programs, and now some of the team members are now managing programs they had not managed before. For them, it's a new program, it's a new initiative. In that environment, you're going to probably need someone with strong background in diversity and inclusion, but to provide leadership to those efforts and to allow you to make sure the team members are getting the support they need with these initiatives that they're not very familiar with. And if you have a team that is used to strong leadership and also has new programs, then that team is probably going to need a very strong ICDO. Probably someone who has sat in that role before, and you may not be able to find that person internally, so that might be someone you search for outside the organization. So you can see how all this comes together in terms of finding the right leader. It sounds like it should be an easy task and no brainer, no thought given to it, but getting this right sets the stage for success along the way for all the other things we'll talk about here today.
Excellent, excellent. So now we're kind of shifting into the piece that the majority of our listeners want to know about, because once you have the right interim leader in place, Bill, how do you ensure that that person has a clear understanding of what's expected of them moving forward?
And I'm happy to see that one was high on people's lists, because that is one that is often kind of given the brush, kind of overlooked as a key issue, but really is extremely important. And in my mind, again, what we did at Auburn, what happened and worked well, is it's a joint responsibility. The organization has part responsibility, and also the individual stepping into their role as well. And let me talk about the organization first, because with them, the very first thing you have to understand is the interim CDO is not the same as the CDO. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is you're not going to empower this person in the exact same fashion. What happens oftentimes, they pull out the position description, the job description for the CDO, they give it to the interim and say, this is the job, go do it. And then they get down there and they start doing stuff, and chaos ensues because they're not quite sure what they should be doing and not doing, and we didn't have those discussions. It really is important to make sure it's very, very clear, and it doesn't happen. You can't get that from the job description. So what I'm saying is convert that job description to something else. What I did at Auburn, I talked with the provost about what he was looking for in terms of interim leadership, what the team was doing, did my background research with the team members, interviews, and so forth. And I decided what we really needed to have was a work plan, like a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, et cetera work plan. And so we created a 30-day work plan looking at what do we need to do, what do I need to do in the team in the first 30 days. And a lot of that was not on the position description, was not in the job description for the CDO, because it was stuff that related to transition, change management, team building, personal growth development stuff. All these things are outside of the typical scope, were critical in those first 30 days. So we did that up front. And then after we got close to the end of that first 30-day period, we did the next 30 days, and then the next one, develop a plan for my entire tenure there. But that worked out very well, having a plan in place and using that plan to decide what the activities should be. So clear expectations, they were set, and I clearly understood what I needed to do in the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And as a consultant, that was extremely important for me, obviously. Another big issue is the whole issue of discussing responsibilities. We got into this position with Auburn. It was totally new for them. They had never done anything like this before. So we were writing the script as we went along. But one of the things that we kind of stumbled into was things like this. Well, when it comes to hiring and firing and starting new programs or performance evaluations or even new policies, procedures, what should my role be? What should I be doing? Because if you think about it, the interim CDO could really set the stage for great success, a great foundation for the new CDO, or you can tie his or her hands. If you create new initiatives, new programs, or hire new people to staff those programs, and it's going in the direction that the new CDO does not want to go, then you've created more chaos than solutions for that individual. So thinking about this up front, talking through it, the organization and the individual, having a clear understanding is critical to make sure everything goes well. And with the individual, again, my thought is treat this like a job interview. Do your homework, weigh the pros and cons, assess your readiness. As a job interview for that next senior level job, you wouldn't go in there without asking questions. Don't just accept it because you think it's the right thing to do or someone told you had to do it. Make sure it is a good fit. And the readiness piece, if you have not worked through your diversity stuff, if you cannot be a role model for diversity and inclusion, you're not ready. That is a critical skill for leading a diversity and inclusion effort. So again, these are the things that I see are critical and important. The last thing I'll say, just for tossing in there, document the experience. I decided to do a weekly report, progress report to the provost. It wasn't asked for, but I thought it was important. Again, as a consultant, I want to make sure I'm meeting my marks as I move forward. But it really came in handy down the road. We'll talk about that in a few minutes as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, Bill, we're about halfway through our conversation here, and I do want to give our listeners an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. You can pose questions in the chat box, which again is on your control panel toward the bottom area, and I'll be able to see the questions, and then we can post those questions to Bill. Of course, we will have another formal Q&A at the very end of the webinar. But if there are any questions regarding the first two success factors, selecting the right leader and setting clear expectations, the floor is open for any questions that may be out there. And as we transition into our third area, properly introducing the leader, I do want to say that, you know, Bill, despite the fact that no one selected that as the most important factor, it certainly is a key factor, as you mentioned. And so as I don't see any questions about the first two sections, let's move right into properly introducing the leader. What should an organization do to properly introduce the interim diversity leader, Bill?
Well, I think the quote on the page here kind of summarizes my general comments about this one here. If you're treating your interim leader like an interim, others will treat him or her like an interim as well. And so you want to make sure that you're doing the right things to empower the leader. And I know this was not selected as one of those key high issues, but let me say just a few words about this, because this really is important that you do this and do this well. It does relate quite well to success for the individual in the role that he or she may be playing. And one thing I'll mention right up front is no matter who you have as your interim leader, whether someone from inside the organization or outside the organization, you need to do the same kinds of things to make sure they're being empowered. Even though the internal candidate may be known by others in the organization, they're not known in this role. This is a new role, in a new leadership role. So you need to make sure you introduce them to the organization in that role. And there's just three key things I would mention here. The individual, make sure the person is empowered by you, that they feel empowered. They have the ability to reach out to you, that you've made it clear up front that they have your support, access to you, they can make decisions, they can be proactive in their leadership. All those things are important. They understand that right up front, that's very clear. And it is demonstrated in your actions as well. At Auburn, I met weekly with the provost. In fact, we had an hour's meeting one-on-one and a second hour every week with the executive team for the diversity program. So 2 hours a week, every week for my entire stay down there. That was commitment on his part. And oftentimes the president sat in as well. So that needs to be clear, not just stated, but actualized in the way you carry it out as well. For the team, you want to make sure that you introduce the individual, and this is a senior leader, introduce the individual to the team, one-on-one, face-to-face to the team. And two things you want to do, introduce the individual, but also explain this whole thing around how you have empowered this person. Going back to issues around hiring and firing and policy procedures and changes, make sure that's clear for the team. When that was done for my team down at Auburn, it resolved a lot of issues, it set aside a lot of concerns. It also allowed us to sidestep a lot of problems down the road. So it worked out really, really well for us, and it will for you as well. And for the organization, I would say, again, you want to make sure the senior leadership is introducing your new interim individual in the same fashion it would the CDO. Email, memos are fine, reception is great. Meetings, have that individual join you in your meetings with your direct reports. That's probably the best way to introduce. When that was done for me, the deans and others, they knew me face to face, and everything kind of worked itself out very well from there. So even though it wasn't high on your list, it is still high on my list as one of those important things that you do and do well. I think I've said enough on that one there, Danny.
Okay, excellent. And now moving on to our final success factor here, what are some of the challenges organizations face when transitioning from the interim Chief Diversity Officer to the new CDO? And what tips do you have for ensuring a smooth transition back to that permanent leader?
For me, probably the most important tip I will give is the very first one on the screen here. And this is a Covey quote, of course, begin with the end in mind. For me, right up front, when I got the job and started working, I was thinking about the transition. I'm going to be here for just a few months. At some point, transition to a new leader. What can I do right now to start collecting the information I need to make sure that transition is smooth for the next person? If you're not thinking about that up front, then you're missing the opportunity to really do this and do it well. Most of the time, we start thinking about transition during that last month. She's going to be here in a few weeks. What should I do now? I'm saying start early on. And when you start, the goal should be to really bring that person up to speed on the status of diversity and inclusion in the organization. And you can do that in many different ways, but in my mind, probably the best way to do that is to provide the person a detailed document of what happened in the past. Make that person feel like they were there with you for your tenure, be it a few months or several months. When you finish transitioning your knowledge, understanding, and experience to the next person, they should feel like they were there. And some of the things you want to do is, one, you can use that weekly report. It came in extremely handy because everything I had done over the entire tenure of my stay there was in one file, easily accessible. I could pull it right out, go to it, and put together this detailed document for the next CDO. Included in that report, though, was more than just weekly stuff, but also background information. Background was not so much on the organization. You have to assume the CDO did her due diligence, his due diligence during the search process and studying the organization, but background on you, your background, how you were selected, what you were empowered and charged with doing, what you did and did not do, kind of things. That kind of background stuff is important. The mini SWOT analysis, and I say mini because it really is small, 1 page, 4 quadrants, bullets in each one of those, just giving them a sense of the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats both with the team and with the organization. That was extremely helpful in me thinking through how to transition this position and thinking through the opportunities that exist and how best for the new person to hit the ground running in her new role there. Now, that was important. What I did, the impact of what I did, and then advice about the organization, about the culture, about the team, about the issues, about the programs, etc. Any advice I had based on what I had gleaned in my tenure there was extremely important. I actually spent 4 hours reviewing this document with the CDO, answering her questions. Yes, 4 hours. She told me that this was the best thing I could have done for her in helping her transition to this new role. And I've seen her and talked with her several times since then, and she still comments on how helpful, how useful that was, that time we spent up front there. And we did that several days before she started on boards there. We have actually incorporated this document development into the ICDO coaching services that we're doing for clients down the road here. So that's the plan. And again, this is Another one of those I think is extremely important, but it all starts with thinking about it day one and not waiting to the last minute to try to pull this together.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, now that we've kind of covered the 4 success factors, Bill, how about we bring it all together for our listeners? In fact, there's probably some people in our audience who are either in ICDO now or that role may be in their near future at some point. What advice can you give them to make that experience as rewarding as possible?
I would like to focus on just those individuals and those who will be helping to charge or manage those individuals as well. But the advice I would have, I have 16 items here, but they're very short. Some of them are repeated things I've said already. I put them on here for emphasis so they're not lost. But let me kind of walk real quickly through what I have here in terms of the advice I would give you based on my experience both last year, but also over my 30-year career in diversity and inclusion. And it starts with clarity there, making sure there's clarity about the role up front there, obviously. Use the time to prepare the team for the new leader. I did a lot of work that first 30 days, even into the first 60 days, and actually preparing the team for the new leadership. Sitting with each one of them one-on-one, getting a sense of where they are, their program, what they're doing, but also their goals and their vision for their own personal future. Helping them develop a development plan, personal development plan for the future, working with them, mentoring, coaching on issues that I saw that are still rough around the edges, needed help. Those are the kind of things you can do that will be most useful during this period. To make it so that when the new leader comes on board, he or she inherits a team that is better equipped, better skilled, better ready than the team you inherited when you came on board. That formal assessment of the culture and climate of the organization, I would say definitely do that during this time period. If it's not on the books to be done, lobby to have it done. This is a good use of that time. It's also a good use of that time that you're going to do an assessment of the entire organization. It gives the team something to rally around, to build camaraderie, to build teamwork, to build trust in one another, but also it lays a great foundation for the new CDO to have that snapshot of the organization handed to them when they first come on board. So it's a great way to start that transition. Get to know key stakeholders, obviously, is important. Being able to reach out to them freely, openly is important. I say very candidly, very obviously, that you really should refrain from making significant changes in policies, procedures, and also refrain from launching new initiatives during your tenure there for obvious reasons. But at the same time, you want to balance that with really taking advantage of those opportunities that present themselves. At Auburn, they had just finished a climate study 3 months into my tenure there. The provost asked all the colleges and schools, 13 of them, to do new diversity plans. It was an opportunity for the diversity office to really work with them and influence the strategies in those plans. And so we took advantage of that opportunity. They had not done that before in that fashion, but we took that on as an opportunity that would not exist 3 months, 6 months from now. So chances, things like that, yes, you want to do. But you want to refrain from just haphazardly going out developing new programs that then hamstrings that new leader coming on board. Stay close to your supervisor. Again, weekly, monthly meetings, having that close connection is important. Be deliberate about building and sustaining team morale. You can assume morale is going to be high. I would assume just the opposite. Any team going through great change is probably going to have that whole thing of change management being an issue. So assume you need to do some things to keep the morale high, to make sure employees are motivated and excited about what they're doing, and you can find many different creative ways of doing that. Probably my favorite on this list is this one here, and that is using problems that arise as teachable moments. I didn't see myself as the manager, quote unquote, as a consultant. I was not managing the team. I was really kind of supporting the team. And in that role, I was able to support them individually and collectively. So when an issue arises, when an employee fell short of the mark, I was able to call her in, call him in, sit down, and talk very candidly. If I were your CDO, I would be writing you up. This will be in your personal file, your permanent file. Mm-hmm. However, what I want to do instead is talk to you about what you did, what was the problem here, what you could have done differently. And keep in mind, if it happens again, I'll have to mention it to the provost, and he will write you up and go in your file. But we don't want to go there. We want to make sure this never happens again. So use those things that come up as a teachable moment. You are in a unique position to do that as the interim, more so than any other individual in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Assess the team and know the type of leadership they need, and be willing to flex your leadership style to match their needs. And of course, document the experience. I've said that before. Provide a detailed report. I've mentioned that before. In that detailed report, you focus on the organization, on the team, but not on the individuals. The one thing I did not do is try to color the mind of the new CDO about the employees themselves. Now, in terms of major issues about an employee, you talk about those that need to be concerned about. But saying this one's good, this one's bad, this one should stay, this one should go, I did not do that. And I recommend strongly that you not do that as well, because you need to let the leader come to his or her own conclusions about the employees. The employee who had a tough time working with you may work very well with this new leader based on his style, based on her style. So let the employees and the CDO come to some kind of conclusion about the value of, the worth of the employees as they move forward there. Meet with the team frequently. We did monthly meetings, sometimes more frequently, and that's important. Again, they're going through a lot of stuff, and staying in touch with them is important, but also use those meetings to do some things that are fun. Don't just focus on the task at hand, but take 10 minutes. You can take 10 minutes out of every meeting and figure out something to do that is team building or fun or builds camaraderie or morale, something that takes them out of the norm and puts them in a different space and allows them to work with one another, to build some sense of community there with a fun activity. You can also use that time in those meetings to expose the team to team members who have talents and gifts and skills that go far beyond the work they do for the team itself. At Auburn, we had team members who were also on the faculty. And the other members knew they were faculty members, but didn't know what they taught, didn't know the research they were doing, didn't know they were eminent scholars in their field. There was a lot they didn't know about what this person was doing, and it was like a wild experience for them to hear that. You'll also find that a lot of times these diversity team members are in the community doing great things. Give them a chance to express those kind of things in the team meetings. Again, it shows their commitment to the principles of diversity, and that could be a plus for everyone sitting around the table and listening and hearing. So again, you can use that time wisely to do a whole lot more than just keep tabs on who's doing what. And if you do that and do it effectively, you really are doing those things necessary to make that transition smooth and effective for everyone involved. Now, Danny, those are my 16 top things for transition, and I would open it up for questions for the audience there, for anything that you may have on your mind.
Excellent. Well, those top 16, that you really just summarized everything. I feel like anyone that is preparing themselves for an ICDO role definitely has a new take on it, and definitely is much more prepared than at the top of the seminar. And Bill, we do have a couple of questions. I was able to open up our questions tab. I'm not sure if you're able to see the questions tab that I just opened.
I do not see them here, so go ahead and...
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and share that, and thanks to everyone who let me know that you could see the screen at the beginning. I'm just seeing the note for that. But we do have a question from Barbara, who wants to know, what types of things did you personally do to keep morale up? And again, Barbara is asking, and this is a great question, Bill, what types of things did you do at Auburn or even at another point in your diversity career? What types of things did you do to keep morale up?
That is a great question. When I arrived at Auburn, keep in mind they had just lost their 2 senior leaders. Both leaders had major programs underneath them they were managing personally, so there's a whole lot of transition and turmoil going on. So morale, one of the first things I did was made it very, very clear what I was going to focus on in terms of key issues. I had three things on my list: trust, team building, transformation. And I talked to each person individually about those three issues. I spent an hour with each person, spent some time talking about those three issues, but also asking them, what are your goals for the future? Let me see how I can help you reach those goals. One of the first things we did to really build morale was a full-day off-site retreat, a team building retreat. We had no real quote-unquote work to do. It was all about building up the team. And with my partner, Zach, we fashioned a day that was heavy on activities that got them interacting one with the other, that were fun to do, and really allows them to kind of gel as a team. The other thing I did for morale, and it sounds very simple, this team was spread across the campus in 4 different locations. So we actually spent a lot of time up front bringing the team together and having them all in one room. And on the other side, every week I was on campus, walked to each of those 4 locations. I did that, walk around management thing there, walked each location, sat with them in their space to let them know what you're doing over here is important to me and to the office, the main office. Those are some simple things I did on that project to build morale.
Absolutely, that's excellent. And we actually have another question with several minutes more of the Q&A. Deborah wants to know, what do you think is the single greatest strength of the lead diversity officer? The single greatest strength of the lead diversity officer, in your opinion?
There's a long list, obviously, but if I would think about the one thing, I would say the diversity officer really has to be a role model for diversity and inclusion in the organization. They need leadership skills, management skills, probably some skills around training and development, coaching and all that stuff. But if they're not a role model, if they don't model the principles of diversity in their normal walk of life, when they're interacting with the team, when they're out in the community, be it the organization or in the broader community, if they cannot model diversity, it's very difficult for them to be effective in that role. To me, that really is the single most important success factor for a chief diversity officer.
Excellent, excellent. And we actually have a question from one of our internal recruiters. Terry wants to know, in your experience, Bill, what kind of companies and or industries tend to need or be interested in diversity and inclusion efforts?
I've worked in corporate, government, university, and consulted in not-for-profit organizations as well. What I find is that universities oftentimes are, believe it or not, the thought leaders around diversity and inclusion. When you see new creative directions in which diversity goes, they're going from straight diversity to diversity and inclusion to diversity and inclusion and equity kind of issues. You find that happening first on the university campus and then other places. Corporate, however, probably has the largest initiatives and the largest programs around diversity and inclusion. So those two are high on the list. Government has a quote-unquote commitment to fairness, but they oftentimes fall short by focusing more on affirmative action and EEO kind of things and spending less attention on diversity. So I would say university is a thought leader. Corporate is probably the leader in terms of really moving those programs forward in a broad-based fashion.
Absolutely. Kristen asked, and this is a great question, she noticed the session is being recorded and how can she get a copy of this recording? That's kudos to you, Bill, because obviously people want to share this information and listen to it again. And Kristen and everyone else, we will be posting this link in the blog section of our website as well as on our social media, which please do follow us, like us, link in with us, connect with us, subscribe to our channel. I'll be posting all of our social media in the chat box momentarily. And we do actually have time for 1 or even 2 more questions if there's anyone out there who has a burning question. And Bill, you have been so kind as to allow people to contact you outside of the webinar and get those answers to any unanswered questions and post them on our blog. Is that right?
By all means, yes. By all means.
Okay,
feel free to contact me.
All right, and so we have Bill at thehrsource.com, and I'll put that in the chat box as well. We also have your phone number that you don't mind sharing through the office line here at the HR Source. And so I'm going to
Oh, yes. I don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay, great. And so if you have your pens and papers ready, again, I am going to post this in the chat box, but if you're taking notes, it's Bill at thehrsource.com, and Bill's number with us is 301-459-3133, extension 17. One more time, that's Bill at thehrsource.com, 301-459-3133, extension 17. And again, I will be posting that in the chat box. Maisha wants to know, if you wanted to start learning more about diversity to be able to introduce it into your workplace, where would you begin? And that's a great question, Maisha.
I think you began by contacting HR Source. We have launched this diversity effort, not just for the Chief Diversity Officer, but also for organizations in general. We're going to be doing a training program on diversity and inclusion. Danny, I think you have the dates, the exact dates for the program.
Exactly. We actually have our class coming at the end of April, Maisha, yes, and audience. I have the date as the 28th, but we will be posting final dates and the final location, again, on our social media as well as on our website. And in addition, if you want to hear more about that coming up, there's a live chat with none other than Bill Shackelford, and that will be on Love Day, on Valentine's Day, February 14th at noon, and I'll be facilitating the live chat through our YouTube channel. So if you love diversity, that's a great way to celebrate Valentine's Day. You can join us and learn more about the classes coming up. And I see we answered your question effectively, Maisha, so thanks for that. Actually, Bill, one more question sliding in there from Edith. Edith is an HR generalist and wants to know what ways can she transfer her skills into the area of diversity. Another great question. Again, Edith wants to know, as an HR generalist, how can she transfer her existing skills into the area of diversity?
I'm not sure where you're located, Edith, but one thing you can do is identify diversity consulting firms in your area and, quote unquote, volunteer your time to support them, to help them, to learn from them. I learned a lot just by working with other partners along the way who had much more established firms than I did when I first got started. And I've taught and trained several people who had a similar background, want to make that transition from HR to diversity, who worked with me over the years supporting programs that I had going on. That would be my best advice in terms of how to get that process started. You know, keep your current job, you can keep doing what you're doing, but at the same time, getting your feet wet in the whole issue of diversity and inclusion, seeing whether that's really what you want to do, and then moving forward from there.
Excellent. And listeners, as you can see, I am in the process of posting all of our social media in the chat box. So please do copy that information down. You can click on these live links and save them to your favorites or bookmark them. As well, I've just posted our live chat coming up with Bill Shackelford on Love Day, on Valentine's Day at noon. As well, I'm also going to post in the chat box Bill's email, again, at bill@thehrsource.com, and he is reachable on 301. And listen, this is not a rote invitation. Bill is very responsive and is looking forward to hearing from you. So please do reach out to him. We are excited to offer these diversity and inclusion services, and this is an opportunity for us to really serve the marketplace in an underserved area, and it will be very helpful to us to learn what the demand truly is. So please do share this information with your contacts as well. Bill, any final thoughts before we close out?
Well, Danny, thank you very much for hosting me today. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone being on the line with me today as well. Each and every one of you, thank you for spending your time with me. If I can be of further assistance in any way, please reach out to me. Let me know. Thanks again. Appreciate it very much, and I will see you online next time.
That sounds great. And remember, everyone, next time is February 14th at noon with yours truly, Danny Thomas, your talent acquisition strategist and host of our YouTube channel and live webinars. Couldn't have gone more smooth, Bill. Thank you so much for being an excellent expert with us. And we look forward to working with you. Absolutely. Everyone have a fantastic day and look for the recordings to be posted all over social media as well as our website, thehrsource.com. Thanks, everyone.